Okay, welcome back to our discussion of operations management topic. Today we'll look into topic of inventory management within operations management area and chapter 13. And in today's lecture, we'll focus on elements of inventory management, inventory control systems, economics of economic order quantity models that are used in here, and then we'll look into specific variations of production quantity model and quantity discounts. Then we also look into the issue of reorder point and various other order quantity issues. Now, in terms of function of inventory, the purpose of inventory is to determine how many units to order. So this area of inventory management, there are two basic questions: how many units to be ordered and when to order those units. Provide the function inventory provides a stock of goods to meet anticipated customer demand and provide a selection of goods. So this is the key aspect of continuous replenishment. If you know every month you're going to consume a 5-gallon of water in the office, it makes sense to get the water to give you a 5-gallon jug every period in that case. So that's the meeting anticipated customer demand. Whereas also it helps decouple suppliers from production and production from distribution. It provides the buffer of inventory in case there is variation in demand or supply among these supply chain entities. Allows one to take advantage of quantity discount. If you buy more, you can buy in bulk. Provide a hedge against inflation. If you buy in advance, you could buy things before the prices go up, if you will. Protect against shortages due to delivery variations. That happens a lot in global supply chain environments where several factors, country-related factors or global supply chain or transportation factors may come into play and affect delivery of the raw material, etc. Permit operations to continue smoothly within the use of work in process while you have items to carry you over before the next fresh supplies come in. From a supply chain perspective, demand information, a bullwhip effect, demand information is distorted as it moves away from the end user. So high safety stock inventory is stored to compensate for that demand. So there is some linkages between inventory management and its resulting impact on supply chain management. A lot of times there is seasonal and cyclical demands that are also coming into play in supply chain management. Every one can make adjustments, seasonal adjustments that we discussed in chapter for forecasting to take that into account. Inventory provides independence from vendors. That way, production is unfettered, unconstrained by what vendors' capabilities are. Take advantage of price discount that we mentioned. And also independence between stages of workstations to avoid stoppage, buffer that we mentioned. In terms of quality management in supply chain, customers usually perceive quality service as availability of goods and they want when they want them. So typically, inventory must be sufficient to provide high quality customer service in supply chain management to get high quality ratings. Nature of inventory, it is one of the most expensive assets in many companies, representing as much as about 50% of total invested capital. Operations managers must balance inventory investment and customer service in this case. So typically, the type of inventory that you come across is the raw material inventory, which are purchased but not processed. Those are just bought from the vendor. And then others are purchased parts and supplies, and these supplies could be components, subcomponents, which are manufactured in parts and then delivered to the company to be assembled in the final goods. Then we have work in process, partially completed products, which have undergone some changes but not completed. These are the function of cycle time of a product. That is, how many are in the pipeline will dictate how many units can come out in a given period out of the assembly line. And what items are in the mail, traditionally speaking, and those are items which are in the supply chain being transported to the company. So those are also some sort of inventory. Then you have MRO, maintenance, repair, operating inventory. These are necessary to keep the machinery and processes productive, such as tools and equipment that are needed, cleaning supplies, etc. And then you have finished goods, which are completed product awaiting shipment. In this case, inventory management examines how inventory items can be classified and how accurate inventory records can be maintained in this case. Now, in terms of inventory categories, you have the cycle inventory, and versus the cycle inventory average is Q plus 0 divided by 2. In this case, where you look at in a given cycle, the maximum inventory can be at any given time is Q. The minimum, it can be 0. On average, it's Q divided by 2. That's the cycle inventory. Then you also have the safety stock inventory, which is kept just for a rainy day, in case for things that are not planned in this case. So there is a safety stock can address things which are unanticipated demand inventory. Then you have anticipation inventory, which is handled by continuous replenishment. Every month, if we consume a certain amount of, or every week, let's say, in a household, they consume 5 gallons of milk. So accordingly, one has to address that much amount has to be brought in. But you may buy 6 just in case there is an unanticipated demand, and that's the safety stock part that may come in. Pipeline inventory, the items in supply chain, which is demand multiplied by average lead time that one has to place an order. It's always await orders for replenishment. So if inventory replenishment, it reaches 0, average inventory is half the order quantity, as I mentioned, that Q divided by 2 that is coming into play. Now, in terms of inventory type and control, there are 2 forms of demand. You have dependent demand as well as the independent demand. Dependent demand is the demand for items used to produce final products. So typically, that's which will be covered in Chapter 15 in Material Requirement Planning. Tires for automobiles are a dependent demand items, which customers, normally those are usually purchased by automobile manufacturers. Some tires could be used as replacement tires, and that is independent demand item. Whereas demand for items used for external customers is typically independent. So the actual car that is purchased by a final customer is an independent demand item, which is decided by the customer alone. And those are the focus of Chapter 13 that we're covering right now. So car, appliances, computers, houses are examples of such inventory. And how do we take control, what type of control systems we use to manage inventory? We have continuous system where a barcode could be used, so inventory records are updated on a continuous basis. As the items are being checked at the cash register, they are being scanned through the barcode, and the inventory is continuously being reduced in the shop's warehouse. And in this case, since we know exactly what the inventory level is, we always offer a fixed order quantity of reorder. So constant amount ordered when inventory declines to a predetermined level. Whereas periodic order system is used when you may not have an accurate record of how much inventory do you have. In that case, you may say, okay, I'll buy these goods once a week, or once a day, or every third day. So in that case, the quantity may change, but order frequency is not changes. So those are the type of things. Remember, we mentioned there are 2 primary questions in inventory management: how much to order and when to order. So in one scenario, continuous system, you are making when to order constant. In that case, how much to order remains constant, but when to order is dictated by when we reach the certain predetermined level. In periodic system, when to order remains constant, but how much to order becomes variable. So periodic system is also known as P systems. Continuous system is also known as Q systems in industry lingo. In terms of inventory cost, it's a balancing act. There is a pressure for keeping low inventories as well as pressure for keeping high inventories. So pressure for low inventory is because the interest and opportunity cost, that money can be used somewhere else, put to other good use. Storage and handling costs may be expensive in certain high expensive cities for carrying the items in a warehouse. Taxes, insurance, shrinkage cost, which is cost of deterioration, obsolescence, all those factored in shrinkage. Then pressure for high inventory is if the ordering cost and setup cost are pretty high. Transportation cost may be expensive. Every time you place an order, you have to pay for shipping and handling, which may add up a considerable portion. Customer service may be another factor, the cost of customer service, overheads that one has to pay for in order to place an order. Labor equipment utilization may be not maximized if you, in order to make sure you have high labor and equipment utilization, there is a pressure to carry high inventory so that labor or equipment is never idle. Payment to supplier is another reason for routine payments to supplier provides a incentive to carry high inventories in this case. Now, in terms of trade-offs, you can see cost and trade-off, a variety of inventory-related costs. You have the ordering cost, which is the fixed cost associated with ordering inventory. So every time you place an order, there's a cost associated with that. Every time you set up a machine from painting gun, painting equipment, from painting blue vehicles to red vehicles, you have to change the paint canister. So in that case, that's a setup cost, cost of stopping the line and changing the equipment in that case. So cost of changing equipment from producing one product to another. So it's analogous to ordering costs. So a lot of times it's used interchangeably. But in production model, we use setup cost. Carrying cost or inventory holding cost is cost associated with carrying inventory, insurance, storage, opportunity cost of money tied up, as we mentioned earlier. Stock out or shortage cost associated with not having inventory when customer wants it. So there is a lot of times it's hard to calculate this cost because lost customers may not be easily identifiable or measurable. In the cost of purchasing the goods, the actual inventory, sometimes quantity discount lower this cost, but comes to the expense of raising carrying costs. So trade-offs over here are ordering cost and carrying cost are inversely related, which we'll see in a bit. Large orders increase average inventory and carrying cost, but the larger the order, the less frequency you have to order. So in this case, some of the metrics in supply chain that we have looked at, inventory turns, which is flow rate divided by average inventory that comes in. So in this case, the lower the inventory, higher the turns, and higher the inventory, lower the turns that typically end up seeing. Weeks of supply, which is closely related to average inventory divided by weekly demand. If demand remains same, the more you carry in inventory, the more weeks of supply you have. Now let's go ahead and look at an important tool, which is known as ABC analysis for inventory management. And this is a tool which allows you to categorize your inventory, all the inventory that a company keeps, into three categories: A items, B items, and C items. So in this case, class A items are high annual dollar volume items, the more expensive portion. So in a vehicle, the engine or chassis would be an example of A items. And C items are the low annual dollar volume items, so nuts and bolts that go into put very inexpensive items that go in to contribute to all the parts that go into a vehicle. So those will be next, but many of those are used in this case. So you have class A items are about 70 to 80% of the dollar volume. So in a vehicle, the most expensive components are the engine as well as the, in this case, chassis, drivetrain, etc. So that will amount to majority of the dollar components of the inventory that the company carries. But in terms of percentage of the items, they are between 5 to 15% of the items. B items are in the middle, about 15% of the dollar volume, but about 30% of the items fall in that category. And then C items, dollar volume wise, they are about 5 to 10% of the total dollar contribution, but 50 to 60% of the total components in a company, organization, or a product may fall in that C category. So in this case, you can see by dividing it, other criteria other than dollar value may be used in case high unit cost, dollar invested profit potential, stock out penalties. In pharmacies, the A items typically are the controlled substances because of the potential risk associated with having them available for if they are not monitored well. It can lead to dire consequences in terms of theft or wrongfully labeled and somehow shrinkage happening, and thereby putting pharmacy in the harm's way in terms of liabilities. So that could be class A, even though the cost is not much for many of those controlled substances. So again, other criteria can be used to establish policies that focus on few critical parts and not on the many of the other trivial ones. So just like a Pareto chart, this is just a way to calculate the information, but from an inventory point of view. More emphasis on supplier development of A items, tighter physical inventory control for A items, and more care for forecasting A items that you look at. So here is an example of ABC classification. So you have 10 different parts that is carried in inventory as in a hypothetical example. Each one has a unit cost and the annual usage. So what we need to do is multiply columns 2 and 3 to come up with the product. So in this case, the total value of 30,600 is for part number 9. So what you're really looking at is taking 510 times 60. When you multiply this, you'll come up with $30,600. So that is, once you calculate that in each of these products, then you're putting it in the descending order of dollar volume. So in this case, the most expensive item, when you find the most expensive product, or highest product is the 510 times 60 that is calculated to be 30,600. So this list has been reordered in the descending order of total value. So part number 9 has the maximum contribution, so $30,600 out of $85,400, whereas part 7 has the least amount of contribution to that number. So in this case, you can see if you take every single one of these values and divide it by 85,400, you can come up with the percentage value, percentage of total value. So 30,600 is basically 35.9% of 85,400. And so in this case, in terms of total quantity, you're looking at what you're looking at is this is the total value wise, and now going back here, the annual usage is given to you, how much you end up using. So if you take these numbers and just add them up and you get the total annual usage. So in this case, item 9, which is 60, divided by the sum total of that will give you whatever the annual usage is. And in this case, it's about 6%. Whereas item 7, which is 17%, that is because of 170 in here, in this case. So, let me see. And then 6 is 180. So again, you can see that is 18%. So I think, I suspect these numbers all add up to, I believe, 1,000 is the number that these annual usage add up to. So because 180 comes out to be 18%. So that's where that number is coming from. So in this case, so you have a total 6%, 5%, 4%. So altogether, this comes out to be 15%. And that's where the A item is being separated out. It's more of an art than a science. There is no correct way. But one can easily look at see there is a huge difference between 16 and 6%. So that could be one logical explanation for separating A and B over here. And then B and C over here is being done based on the 40% versus over here. Another variation of that could be to actually look at A items as just part 9 only. And then items B could be just 8 and 2, and the rest, everything could be part C. So that could be another. If I had to do that, I would do it that way. So only part 9 would be A items. 8 and 2 will be B items, and everything after 2 will be C items. So there is no hard or fast rule of how to do it. It all depends on the industry, in terms of economy, because the more items you put in A, the more expense you have to incur to monitor those and keep track and create reports and follow through on A items. So in this case, it doesn't make sense to keep track of items that are only 6%, 5%, 4% of the value. So many companies can forego following them more closely and putting them all in C category. These two could be in B category. And then number 9, it could be just in A category. So that's another variation. If I had to do it, that's how I'll do it. But according to the textbook, they are ending up putting 9, 8, and 2 in category A, which is about 71% of the total value, and 1, 4, and 3 in the class B, and then finally last 4 in the class C category. It all depends on the particular objectives of the company in terms of what they really want to focus more on. Cycle counting is another policy tool that is used a lot with ABC analysis, often used with ABC analysis to determine cycles. So one of the key elements of inventory is to maintain inventory accuracy. So this refers to how well the inventory records agree with physical count. So cycle counting is a physical inventory taking technique for ensuring accuracy in which inventory is counted on a frequent basis rather than once or twice a year. And what you end up doing is you're counting A items more often than B or C items. So in this case, eliminate shutdown and interruption, eliminate annual inventory adjustment, train personnel audit inventory accuracy, and allows causes for error to be identified and corrected. So you can see why shrinkage of inventory happens, and more importantly, avoid shrinkage of A items from happening in the first place, because those are the ones you really want to monitor very carefully. Maintain accurate inventory records in this case. Now let's go to inventory models, and we'll start off with economic order quantity model, and this is the basic EOQ model, where optimal order quantity is calculated that will minimize total inventory cost. The assumptions over here for a basic EOQ model are that demand is known with certainty and is constant over time. Decisions for items are independent from one another, so what you're deciding for one part or SKU stock keeping unit in the inventory is different from any other stock keeping unit in the inventory. Lead time for the receipt of order is known as constant. There is no uncertainty. So these are the assumptions we have. Receipt of inventory is instantaneous and complete. Whatever amount we order, we get it right there and then, as if the supplier was next door. Quantity discounts in the basic EOQ model is not possible, but that can be relaxed when we look into quantity discounts. Only relevant variable costs are ordering / setup or holding costs. No shortages are allowed, so what we do is stockouts can be completely avoided. And we can do that by ordering all the order quantity can be received all at once. So no constraints on size in this case to avoid that. Now, in the EOQ cost model, what happens is, how do you derive the optimal quantity? The total cost is made up of the ordering cost, which is ordering cost per unit times the demand. This gives you the total number of units ordered. Price of the total number of units ordered divided by the quantity per order. So that gives you the number of orders and multiplied by the ordering cost. So D over Q gives you the number of orders times the cost per order. This is the total ordering cost. And over here, Q divided by 2 is the average quantity that you have in the inventory. So this is the average inventory that we mentioned earlier in cycle inventory. And multiplied by the carrying cost per unit, which gives you the total inventory cost. So total cost is made up of only two numbers, ordering cost and the carrying cost, as I mentioned earlier in the only relevant variable cost are ordering cost and holding or carrying cost. Okay, and in this case, when you take the differential equation of that, it is maximized at this level. Or you can equate these two, proving equality of cost at optimal point. When you equate these two numbers and take the unknown Q over on this side and CC goes in the denominator and 2 goes in the numerator. So you have Q squared, which is Q times Q, equals to 2 times CO times D divided by CC, which is coming from the opposite side. And then Q optimal is the square root of this term, which is the same derivation that you can come. And in this case, notice that that number happens to be, so this is the total cost number, that happens to be minimum. The slope is 0 at the point where these two merge, which is the carrying cost and the ordering cost are exactly equal. So that's an important proof that is the basis of all inventory management. So once you have that, now we can go ahead and take an example. Over here you have the carrying cost of 75 cents per gallon on an annual basis that we have to pay. Every time you place an order, you're looking at $150 per order, and demand is 10,000 gallons. So given this information, this is the given data. You can plug those numbers in here into the optimal quantity, economic order quantity, and you have 2 times 150, which is CO, times the D 10,000 divided by 0.75, which is coming up to, when you take a square root of this, it gives you exactly 2,000 gallons. That means what it's recommended is to, every time you place an order, you should order 2,000 gallons at a time. So if we have a total demand of 10,000 gallons in a year, and every time we place an order, we are ordering 2,000 gallons, 10,000 divided by 2,000 is 5 orders per year is what the number of orders that you'll end up placing. So in this case, every 2.4 months that you're placing an order. Now, total cost associated with that is, as we mentioned earlier, the formula COD, CO times D divided by Q plus CC times Q divided by 2. So these two numbers, you'll notice, will be exactly the same, because at Q optimal, carrying cost, ordering cost equals to carrying cost. So 750 plus 750, that's 1,500. So that's the total cost, minimum cost of inventory that will be achieved if we order 2,000 gallons at a time. Order cycle time, if we only are working 311 days in a year, so 311 days, either it could be 1/5 of a year, 1 year divided by 5, or 311 days divided by 5, so that gives you 62.2 store days that the store is open. So that's an example of EOQ calculations. Now, a variation of that can be used for production quantity model, and in that case, what we are relaxing is orders are received gradually, because what we are doing is we are producing them in-house. We are not getting it from an outside supplier. The truck doesn't come in and drop the inventory instantaneously. We are actually making them and selling them as we go along. So in that case, orders are received gradually as inventory is simultaneously being depleted. So also known as non-instantaneous receipt model. Assumption is that Q is received all at once, is relaxed. So in this case, we are not assuming all Q is available all instantaneously. So in that case, we have two additional notations. P is the daily rate at which order is received, and D is the daily rate at which inventory is demanded. So this is the production rate we are producing, and the daily rate at which items are produced, and whereas this is what inventory is demanded. So one of the conditions has to be that production rate has to be greater than demand, otherwise this will not work. So in this case, notice that what happens is, as we start with zero inventory, and that's when we end up receiving the order, that is from a production facility, from a production department. We start receiving the order, and but we ordered Q, but what we end up receiving in our warehouse is Q multiplied by 1 minus D over P, because remainder, the D over P is actually being depleted, is being sold instantaneously. It is going towards what is needed to deliver our, so in this case, to satisfy the existing demand. So P minus D is the remainder which is actually going into the warehouse in this particular case. So in this case, what we end up seeing is this is the time, this will be the only time where orders are actually being accumulated in the warehouse, but instead of going instantaneously, they are being accumulated on a gradual basis, because every day we are using some for direct use to cater to the demand of the customer, and remainder, what we are producing in excess, is going in the warehouse, all the way till we have enough for that cycle, and the remainder time, that's where the production stops, and then we just strictly start selling the remainder. As soon as we reach zero, we crank up our production process again and start producing it all the way again. And at this point, we have enough to cater to the remainder of the cycle, and then we repeat the cycle again. So this is the average inventory level, maximum inventory level, etc. And this is the beginning of the production period and the end of the production period. So in this case, what you're looking at is a production quantity model. So you have production rate and demand rate. And in this case, maximum inventory level is basically Q times 1 minus D over P. And average inventory level is always half of that. So Q over 2 times 1 minus D over P. And in this case, the total cost is adjusted because we are not carrying all the inventory in the warehouse. So it's slightly less because some of it is, as it's being produced, hot off the shelf, hot off the machine is being sold that day. So not everything is carried over in the warehouse, unlike the basic EOQ model. So that's the difference. That same factor is being plugged in here. And then our optimal quantity of production, wherever you see CC, you have to multiply it with this 1 over D minus P. And that is the adjustment factor that you'll see throughout. And in this case, production quantity model, give an example. You have CC, same example where 75 cents per gallon and ordering cost is $150 per order. Demand in a year is 10,000 gallons. Now, a daily demand rate, given the fact that the store is open 311 days in a year, is 32.2 gallons per day, which is 10,000 divided by 311. But our production capability is 150 gallons per day. So given that information, instead of what we need to, our production order quantity is 2,256.8 now instead of 2,000 even. So in that case, the total cost actually reduces from 1,500, which was earlier, now to 1,329. And the production run is basically every order will actually 15 days per order is when the machines will be working. And after that, we'll shut them down because that will be enough to satisfy the remainder of the cycle. So in this case, number of production runs that you're going to have is 4.43 runs a year. Maximum inventory level at any given time you will have in the warehouse. Instead of 2,000 units that you mentioned earlier, now it's 1,772 because the remainder 228 units are being sold as they are being produced during the day. So that's where adjustment comes in. Now, the third variation, another variation is with the quantity discounts, where price per unit decreases as the order quantity increases. So now you have the original total cost model, which is the ordering cost plus the carrying cost, but now we end up adding the price of the product because quantity discount means the price per unit that you pay changes based on how much you're ordering. So that has to be factored in and compared in order to have an effective comparison. And in this case, P is the per unit price of the items times the annual demand. So that's the total cost of the products that are being purchased. So in this case, you can see if you have an order size of anywhere between 0 and 99, you end up paying $10 price. But if you were to order minimum of 100 units, you pay $8 per unit. And if you are able between 100 and 199, that's the price you pay. And if you manage $200 a unit, that you end up actually getting a $6 per unit price. So in that case, if you were to plug in these three data points and calculate the total cost model, you'll notice that for total cost of 100, you get one curve. Total cost of $8, you get a different curve. And then total cost of third one, you get $6, you get a third cost curve. So in that case, what you're looking at is for each one of these, you can easily calculate what will be the lowest point that you will have. So in this case, quantity demanded has to be 100, and the second one, quantity demanded, has to be 200 in order to break that point. So what we really need to do is compare three different costs. One is finding the optimal quantity, and if that happens to be in between the lower price and the higher price, we need to compare that with the next higher quantity discount and see if it's worthwhile to take advantage of the quantity discount. So in this particular case, in a different numerical problem, we have given quantity discount of 1 through 49. We pay price of $1,400. But if we are able to manage quantities between 50 and 89, we will be given a reduced price of $1,100 per unit. And if we can manage 90 or more units, that's $900 per unit. So ordering cost is given to you, carrying cost is given to you, and demand is 200 TVs per year. So the question is, how much should we order? So in this case, if without total disregard of what the quantity discount numbers are, without that, what is the basic EOQ quantity. So in this case, by plugging in just the CO, CC, and D, you come up with 72.5 anyway. So that means you already qualify for 1100 price. So this one is a moot point. You don't even have to consider the $1,400 price tag because you already qualify for the second category, second tier over here. Now the question is it better to order 72.5 TVs per order and pay the $1,100 price, or is it worthwhile to order 90 TVs at a time and take advantage of the $900? So that's what one has to compare. So if we look at 72.5 Q, so in that case you can plug in the value of Q over here as well as over here. And in this case, you're looking at a certain cost of ordering and carrying, which in this case will be equal, plus the price which is you got is 1,100 times the demand that you have, which is 200. So all these three things add up to 233,784. Compare that to a Q of 90. That's the bare minimum you need to qualify for the next break in price. So that's a 90, and plug that in. So your ordering cost in this case will go down, but the carrying cost will go up because now you're ordering more, as I mentioned it. But the total price that you pay for the cost of the product also goes down. So notice that in this case, it is actually economical to take the quantity discount. If your demand is 200 TVs per year, it makes sense to order 90 units at a time and reduce your cost by $40,000 approximately. So that's a quantity discount model. Now, next we'll look into the reorder point. And in this case, the reorder point is the inventory level at which new orders should be placed. What is the point? It's almost like looking at the reserve dial on the vehicle dashboard and seeing at what time does the reserve light comes on when the gas is reached at a certain point. Same logic over here. What is the time when we should place an order? And that typically applies when there is a lead time. The orders are not filled instantaneously, which is not a reality. It was original assumption in basic EOQ model. But in case of inventory level needs to be found out at which new order is placed when there is a certain lead time from the supplier to deliver additional material. So reorder point is typically demand per period demand multiplied by the lead time in the same period. So if you have a lead time listed in days, you need to multiply that by daily demand that you have. So you need to make sure if the lead time is 7 days, you definitely should have 7 days worth of inventory in this case. So what is, if you have a demand of 3 units per day, so for 7 days, that's 21 units is the reorder point that comes out to be. In this case, simple example, demand is 10,000 gallons per year. Store is open 311 days in a year. So daily demand comes out to be 10,000 divided by 311, which is 32.154 gallons per day. Lead time, if it's given to be 10 days, your reorder level is 32.154 times 10, which is 321.54 gallons. So that's, as soon as you reach that level, an order should go into the supplier to make sure they deliver within 10 days and you don't run out of merchandise. Safety stock buffer added to on-hand inventory during lead time, as I mentioned, and stock out is a shortage. So in this case, another consideration is the service level. Probability that the inventory available during lead time will meet demand. So typically what you want is a probability that demand during lead time is less than or equal to the reorder point. And that is a consideration when the demand is not constant and variable demand environment. So you look into variable demand where the demand can be higher or lower. So the inventory, when the demand is high, you see the inventory decline is much steeper, or when the demand is not as is lower than expected, then you see the inventory lingering around for a long time. So when you have variability, it's not going as a smooth decline, but all zigzag, wavy, based on what is available. So sometimes you may still will be left with inventory while a new order is coming in, while sometimes you may run the risk of shortage occurring in case your product, when you place an order and it doesn't come by the time the inventory is completely depleted. So that could be, so in that case, one has to do is add some safety stock, and that safety stock allows for, so if this is the safety stock, that allows for some buffer. So in this case, we didn't need that buffer over here, but we definitely could have used that buffer, additional inventory for this unanticipated safety stock or demand environment. Okay? So that's one of the things we look into. And in that case, the calculation for reorder point for safety stock, so this is the anticipated inventory during lead time that we calculated earlier when the demand is constant. Plus, this is the safety stock that we're looking into, which is based on a certain service level. That's why we use the Z times standard deviation of the lead time. So we have the daily demand, average daily demand, times the lead time in days, plus Z value, number of standard deviations corresponding to the service level that you have calculated, service level probability. And then in this case, sigma D is the standard deviation of daily demand. But now what we need to do is find out the standard deviation for the demand and for the lead time, not just for the days. So that's where square root of L has to be multiplied in here to calculate the safety stock altogether. Okay, and so in this case, what we are doing is using Z, which is the normal distribution, to address. This is the standard automatic replenishment, the anticipated demand. Plus, you are adding some more buffer so that at least certain. This is all the shaded region is all the probability of meeting the demand. Which is, if we say 95% of the customers should be satisfied with the demand, and that's the 95% will give you this particular Z value on a one-sided Z test. So the remaining 5% becomes the probability of a stock out. Or some companies may say, no, 99 is not good enough, 95% is not good enough, we need 99%. So they are actually going to a higher Z value in this case. Accordingly, they end up keeping higher safety stock. So in this example, the paint store wants to reorder point with a 95% service level and 5% stock out probability. So you have daily demand is 30 gallons per day, and lead time is 10 days. Standard deviation of daily demand is 5 gallons per day. And for 95% service level, you can look at a one-tail Z test, and Z value is 1.65. So plugging that number into the formula, you have 30 gallons times 10 days. That's a 300 gallons is the anticipated demand. Plus, you need to have some safety stock, which is 1.65 times 5 gallons per day is the standard deviation of the daily demand times the number of days in the lead time, which is square root of 10 in this case, adjusted for that. So this becomes 5 times square root of 10 gives you the standard deviation of demand during lead time. So that is 300 plus 26.1, which is 326.1 gallons. So in this case, this portion is just the safety stock that is being calculated. So that pretty much wraps up our discussion for inventory management in this case. And we'll see you next time for another topic in operations management. And take care.